Alleluia. Om Mani Padme. Om Allah.
Welcome to Harmony and Diversity. Norm Currie is my name, and today we're speaking with Richard Leigh, the Managing Director of the Campfire Film Foundation. We spoke last week with him about his faith background, and today we're going to explore the Film Foundation itself. Richard, you have a background in films, do you?
I do. Thanks for having me back, by the way. I enjoyed it.
No, that's a pleasure.
Yeah, I do have a background in film. It's something, you know, I grew out of a love of photography, and I was fortunate enough to go to the College of the Arts in 1997. So that was my postgraduate diploma in film and television, which came on top of a science degree. So that was kind of my qualification. I later got a dip ed as well. But that all happened when I was working for an organisation called VEA, or Video Education Australasia. Okay. So my work for 8 years, starting around 1999, was producing educational videos for schools. And it was in that setting that the idea of Campfire came about.
And you were saying that the idea of Campfire came about in a fairly dramatic way. Could you tell us about that? Yeah,
I don't know whether there was too much drama, but it was certainly a moment that I can pinpoint and say it happened, you know, at 4 o'clock in the morning on Cup Day in November, you know, in 2006. There was a moment that this is it. This is what I've got to do. I guess a little back step from there is that I'd been producing educational videos at that stage for about 7 years, and seeing the opportunity for resources that were getting to that spiritual dimension of life that was like nothing that we were able to produce. When you talk about education and educational videos, in fact I talked to my boss about it. My boss is quite an open and ardent atheist, and he said, we don't do religion. There's plenty of crackpots out there that will do religion. They have their own agenda, they have their own money, they can make their own programs. And I thought, well, okay, that's interesting. But I was looking for something a little bit different to do with my time. I really enjoyed my work, but thought there must be something that we can do to get some of this content in there. It was also the year that YouTube had started. That was a little bit of an inspiration, well, very much an inspiration, because I thought, wow, you can actually have videos on the internet, and you know, people can share them, and that was profound when we realised that was possible. And the other thing was still the sort of fall off from September 11 and the realisation that people were still really awkward about you know, people of different faiths, and you know, in Christian circles it was, you know, the Muslims are coming. But why can't we talk about these things? Where is the space to, you know, to share these deep things? Where if we're not talking about it, there's a danger that we're going to go down a road of intolerance and hatred and just fight about things. Can't we talk about it? And what's the way to talk about it? So it all came together in this moment. As I say, I was up one night, and, you know, reading and writing and thinking, and I thought, I'm a Christian. I believe in peace. I love films. I've been involved in educational videos for a while. What is it? And I thought, this metaphor of a campfire actually came from a friend who many years ago had used that as a metaphor for a good website. It was actually a metaphor for what the internet is like. And he said the internet is like a large field, and in that field people are gathering around different spaces, and some of them are building up, you know, different campfires, if you like. Some of them are building up, some of them are dying down, but they're places that people come to share things. And I thought that's just such a great metaphor for what we can do with film. You know, how can we get short films on the internet and use them as the way for people to come together and to talk about real issues of meaning and purpose. So that was the moment, and then I wrote it all down. This is what it's going to be called. It's about Campfire. It's about coming together. It's got to be about faith. The original idea was it was going to be about Christian films, but I was talking to my boss at work about it. He said, get a Muslim film. And I said, that's a great idea. We're on the internet. So my very first film that I collected was a Muslim film that had been in the Secunda Film Festival. And it kind of went from there.
Yes, it brings me back to something that you were saying last week about your disappointment that a particular girlfriend hadn't been someone who'd been appointed by God. How much of a sort of a God incident do you think this was for you?
Oh, very much. I sometimes think that God works mostly with me in the wee hours of the morning, after midnight and before 4. I'm not sure that's right, but there's certainly, you have the space away from the rush of the day, away from the kids and other sort of time pressures to think a bit more broadly about things. And it's certainly, I have a distinct and deep sense that it was a God moment, if you want to call it that, that the idea was an inspiration that came from God.
And is that inspiration being fulfilled in the ways that you had envisaged?
I didn't know what I was doing at the time. I just knew I had to do something. Right. And in fact, it was a friend from our church that had built the church website. I approached him and I said, look, do you reckon you could build something like YouTube where, we're gathering films? And after he sort of fell off his chair, I said, give me a week to think about it. And he's a real kind of, techie guru. And he came back to me in a week. He said, I think I can build you something. We'll give it a go. And so he built this website. And, I guess the story from that 2006 point to, where we are now in 2013 has been a journey of that unfolding into first just a hobby. My wife reminded me that there's no money involved in how we're going to keep it going, and it is just a hobby, to then an incorporated association, which is more like a club, to now what is transformed into a company limited by guarantee with a business model behind it.
Okay, so it's really on the threshold. Would you see it as being on the threshold of breaking into the next phase?
I hope so. Yeah, certainly. There's been some stages, and we could talk about that. But in a nutshell, it is a social enterprise. So it is now firmly sort of based in business principles and how it can be self-sustaining. But it is on the threshold, I hope, of breaking even. Yeah.
And we're on the threshold of going for a break. Thanks very much. We'll be back. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity. Norm Currie is my name, and we're speaking with Richard Leigh from the Campfire Film Foundation. Richard, clearly the Film Foundation has an organisational structure. What's the history of that and how does it operate?
One of the first challenges that we had moving from what was essentially a hobby club, an incorporated association in Victoria, to a company limited by guarantee was this separation of this idea that I had as a personal being, as a Christian myself, to the entity of Campfire and what that is. And can an entity, an organisation, be a spiritual entity? Yes. I still don't quite know the answer to that, although I think the answer is partly yes. But how does that translate when what we're doing is not agenda-based? It is not a Christian mission or a Christian ministry, as despite what some of my Christian friends think that I'm here to, evangelise. Well, I'm not at all. This Campfire Film Foundation has no agenda to push any particular barrow. We invite people of all faiths and none, and we encourage people from all faiths and none to come together around films. How do we do that in a legal way? How do we wrap that up and make sure that somehow the history of where we'd come from 2006 to 2011 at that point was kind of acknowledged, but not overshadowing what needed to be a very neutral, in the best possible sense of the word, organisation that could do something useful and not just be this floating amorphous thing that just didn't mean anything to anyone.
Yes.
The way we did that, interestingly, it was in a legal framework. We had to write up our constitution, and writing the constitution was a bit of a journey that we all went through. So there was friends, there was the board that I had then was the web guy, another friend who's sort of a bit of my spiritual mentor at the time, and my father and my sister, who I respected a lot. So we were all Christians, How did we separate from that and move on? What we came up with over the course of about 3 months really was a preamble to the Constitution. So the Constitution says now that to be involved with Campfire, on the board, a member, all the ways you might want to engage with it. You can have any faith. It's completely open. It's a secular organisation, but you must agree to this preamble, and the preamble is really important. The preamble says, in essence, this was started with a Christian worldview. It actually came out of a deep, belief in Christian principles, but we acknowledge that you might not agree with that. But please, at the very least, I'm paraphrasing our preamble, but at the very least, acknowledge that everyone has a viewpoint. There is no such thing as religious neutrality. That everyone, whether you're an atheist, even if you're an agnostic, if you're a Buddhist, a Muslim, a Hindu, it doesn't matter. Everything that you think about, every way you frame a film, a perspective on a film, a comment about a film, that comes with a worldview. Just acknowledge that. Don't have to do anything with that. Let's just be understanding that that is what it is we're doing, and that's the preamble, and that's how we got over that.
So there's a very careful avoidance of any presumption of neutrality, so that you can actually deal with the issue, but not hide it.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So your current board comprises how many people?
We've got 4 people on the board, including myself. And people often want to know what the identity of Campfire is. It's just worth highlighting that they come with all sorts of different views. I'm the only one that would probably call themselves a Christian.
Yes.
And we're open with that, and that's who we are. So there's no agenda about what we're doing in a spiritual or religious sense.
An important part of Campfire, of course, is the filmmakers themselves. Where do they come from? What sort of eclectic mix are they?
Very eclectic, and the more eclectic, the better. Not entirely true, but we are collecting films from all around the world. The filmmakers are our stars, really. That's what the Campfire is. A campfire of films, of flickering films, and it's the filmmakers that inject their passion and heart about life, about all sorts of different issues. Anything you care to name, there's probably a short film out there that has been made about that with heart and with passion, and they're the films that we're trying to gather. So we've got everything from filmmakers who are quite openly knocking the idea of God, for example. They're passionate atheists. And we love those films. They get us thinking about, why should I believe in a God if you're saying that? We can objectify this conversation because we can watch this film together. So that stops us fighting. We can watch the film and talk about how we're feeling about that issue. Right. So we've got filmmakers that are Buddhists and Muslims and atheists and Hindus. Everyone comes with an unknown agenda, and that's the exciting part, because we never quite know what we're going to get, but that's what we're given, and that's the heart of Campfire in many ways. What
about the standard of production? Is there a minimum standard? Or?
That's why there's a competition aspect to it. So we run a regular Campfire Film Festival, and we award the best. Right. What we've gone to this year too is a four periodic intakes throughout the year, and so we say, here's the cut-off for this particular school term. We might get, say, 30 films. We're going to pick the 10 best, or the 10 that most align with what teachers in schools are looking for, because that's our social enterprise. But it allows us to sort of weed out the ones that, okay, they might be good on a certain level, or they might just be really rubbish because they're not made very well.
Yes.
But we're looking for that spiritual depth. Not always overtly spiritual or religious, but it needs to have something that touches our heart and hopefully not our microphone, touches our heart and makes us think about what life is about and what it means to be human and what lifelong learning can be about.
And what's the level of usage of this from a school point of view? Is it a resource which teachers recognise and use readily?
There's some who have got it. There's some teachers in a few schools that we've got. Well, we've got approaching now 50 schools who are signed up as members, which is really exciting because they're our funding base, which means we can be sustainable. But there's a few teachers. Some schools have signed up and they kind of don't quite know how to use it and whatever, even though it's straightforward. There's some teachers absolutely bolted on and passionate and going, this is fantastic.
Fantastic.
They're the people that are really helpful, but also they get the idea of what we're on about.
Excellent. Well, we're going to have to unbolt ourselves because we need to go to a break. Thanks for watching. We'll be back. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity. Norm Currie is my name, and we're speaking with Richard Leigh from the Campfire Film Foundation. Richard, on your website, there's this inspirational quotation, and if you bear with me, I'd read it. In a world of increasing globalisation, Campfire has a valuable contribution to make. As people of different belief systems come into contact, a common reaction to these differences is tribalism and fear. Tolerance can only be achieved through understanding both one's own beliefs and the beliefs of others. Now, how has that translated for you? That's been your statement of purpose. What's it look like today?
When we set up the foundation as an organisation, we realised that one of the richest audience pool, if you like, were in schools. Teachers, and this came from my experience with VEA, making educational videos. I knew roughly what teachers were after in schools. And I thought they're not getting these kind of films with heart and real passion behind them. So our focus as an organisation has been on schools. How does it translate? I think what we really hope to do is to get kids excited about learning, and not just learning facts, but learning what it means to be human, learning insights into life, learning from people who might not actually agree with them on an ideological or a spiritual or religious level, but learning in a way that gets them excited about life and engaging with what it means to be human. So it's still a journey. That sort of the ideals of that are there, and it's a goal, it's a destination we're heading towards, and something that we will always be struggling to not only make happen, but also try and measure. We are a social enterprise that needs to measure everything. How are we going to work out whether we're achieving this or not? That's a whole other discussion we're working through with our various partners. But I like to think that, in the same way that it's hard to measure anything spiritual, you can see the wind and the way it moves the trees, but you don't always know what it looks like or where it's coming from, where it's going to. The spiritual aspect of what we're doing is very hard to pin down, but it's real.
Yes.
And teachers that get what we're doing realise that there is this spiritual dimension which is really important.
Those teachers that get what you're doing, is it a large body of them, or is it that a fairly discrete group?
We'd like it to be larger. And I think it's worth highlighting the educational sectors, if you like, because to me that's part of our challenge is to go across the sectors. So you have the independent schools, you have the Catholic schools, you have the government schools. as someone who's not a Catholic, I've been really inspired by Catholics. Some people have called me a sort of an honorary Catholic because I go into schools and more often than not they get what we're doing. We have partnerships with organisations that are really into social justice. They're about showcasing, you know, films and filmmakers who are doing really good things in the world and showing what good can be done when good people put their hand to the plough and get stuff done. A lot of Catholic schools really get what we're doing, and I've spoken at Catholic conferences and got teachers signed up in the schools. Independent schools are independent. You know, there's mixed bags. Some of the more fundamental schools, whether they're Christian or Islamic or whatever, they get it, but there's a little bit more wariness in some situations. Some of the more secular independent schools get it because they've got lots of money and they just go, yeah, sounds good, we'll get it. But others have really adopted it as well. The tricky one, and tricky only because it's such a contentious issue in Australian culture. How do you deal with the spiritual in a government school, a state-based school setting? And the answer is, I don't know, but we're constantly trying to work it out. You don't mention spirituality, you don't mention religion. We don't hide that, and that's why I always am prepared to say, I'm a Christian, this is the background we come from. But every teacher gets that what they're teaching in schools has other layers that they may not have names for or be a bit shy of using in terms of spirituality, faith, belief and all of those things. But they know that deep down there is something going on which films can help them get to. To me, it's the government schools that I get really excited about, because short films and the work that we're doing is really giving teachers an opportunity to go to those places, talk about death. That might be a bit scary, but let's watch this film. How do you relate to that? Let's talk about these other issues. They might not be religious films, but there's a lot of growth that can happen in that area, I think.
So with feedback from teachers, has there been any feedback which has been outstanding in description and inspiration?
There's a number. I should write them down and have them off the top of my head, but the ones that come to mind, look, there was a student, we had a philosophy screening, so 5 films showcasing films that got kids thinking about philosophy. It's the start of a Year 12 unit on the good life, they call it. And you know, one student said it wasn't until she came along to this screening night, saw one of the films, it was actually a music video, it's just a really good music video. She said, it wasn't until I saw that film that I realised that this wasn't just a subject I was learning. This was something that applied to me, and it had really deep implications about the way I was approaching my study. To me, that's exciting, because it's getting her engaged in learning, but about these bigger questions in life too. We've had other, you know, a chaplain at a school who said, you know, one of the films, one of our shortest films, is only 1:20 long. He says he shows that at the start of every year now, because it keeps his students going for about 2 hours. They're writing poetry about their impression of God and what faith means. Oh, these really big questions through 1:20 of this really quite, you know, obscure film in many ways, but it just enlivens these minds.
That's totally inspirational, and we've run out of time, as time is the master here. Thank you so much, Richard. That is really worthwhile work.
Thank you.
If you want to find out more about Campfire Films, you might care to look at their website, which is campfire.org.au. Thank you for watching Harmony and Diversity, and we'll be seeing you next week.
Baha'u'llah, Shanti Om, Allah.